Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Kapa.ai podcast. I'm super excited to be joined today by Tim Berglund, VP of Developer Relations at Confluent. Tim, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Neil, thanks for having me. It's great to be on the show.
Awesome. Tim, you're one of the few people that have been deeply focused on developer education for over a decade, spending time not just at Confluent, but DataStax, GitHub, StarTree. I'd be really curious to get your take on how the role of developer relations has changed since you started more than a decade ago.
Yeah. When I started doing this, it didn't have this label. Nobody said DevRel in 2012. It was kind of what I was doing, but I think there were two phases, and this is autobiographical to some degree, but you could go from 2012 to kind of 2016. There's this crystallizing of, oh, wait, this is a thing. This is a discipline. And there are a set of specialties within it. There are some outcomes that you're trying to create. There's a way that it relates to a business, certain kinds of technology companies that it belongs in. So that's kind of becoming a thing in there. And then you've got that from there sort of pre-pandemic zero interest rate phase of life where there's really a rush and kind of a boom.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of DevRel leaders, small DevRel teams, found in this very ZERPy zero interest rate kind of thing where, like, we're just here to help people. We're not about the business. Nobody's trying to make money here. We just want to help people out. And that didn't work very well. It hasn't worked very well in the past few years. And so now you've got a retrenchment, and it is feeling like it can be a bad time to get a job as a developer advocate. And I think this is a needed bust after the boom. And is typical when you have a boom bust cycle. It's not the bust that you should be looking at. It's what was going on during the boom that's interesting. And so now we see that overinvestment and sort of unmoored investment of just paying people to do DevRel without any goals in mind. What I see happening now, and certainly this has been my story, is really kind of trying to refine an idea of how to stay faithful to developer education in a way that contributes to a business in a quantifiable way.
Maybe I actually need to dive in there, because I think you bring up like a really interesting topic. I see this get brought up on Twitter all the time, but it's like specific goals, right? I'd be curious now, as you're almost maybe stepping back into your role at Confluent, what are some of the goals that you think about setting for a DevRel team, and what are some goals you think that folks, whether or not they have a formal DevRel role or not, should be setting to make some of those actions a bit more concrete?
Totally. It kind of depends on the kind of company you are. So if you look at my DevRel history, there was a little developer tools period, GitHub, right? And then there's a bunch of data infrastructure. And so I've kind of refined my thinking in the data infrastructure space. Or you could just say infrastructure, where it's the only kinds of human beings who can use, say, what Confluent makes, Kafka, Flink, all this kind of stuff. Are developers don't pay for infrastructure, so you have this big gap between the user and the buyer. And there's this whole go-to-market organization that's focused on trying to find buyers and sell to them. And so the goals that we have as DevRel is to help the users of that technology be aware of it and be successful with it. So, I mean, like quantitatively in terms of metrics, that can look like a lot of different things, but I use this analogy of, if it's a farm and we're all trying to have a really big harvest as a company, developers are the soil that enterprise infrastructure sales grow in. And so it's our job to make that soil healthy. Lots of ways to do that. We use meetups, a robust developer advocacy effort, people speaking at conferences, fun demos, and video has always been an important part of what I do. And measuring the activity. Step one is just, are people engaging with your content? Are people coming to your talks? Does anybody care? And doing those things and doing them well is going to help create that fertile soil.
That's really, really helpful. And I guess to your point, right, that also varies hugely from company to company. I can imagine you're looking at a lot more advanced things that, Confluent that you were back in the very early days of thinking about training at GitHub and getting more people to use Git, right?
Yeah. They're. I mean, because that's a developer tools play, and they still have, I think, a much more sophisticated
Yeah.
enterprise sales motion these days. They had one back then.
Yeah.
You still have an enterprise sales motion if you're GitHub, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's also kind of the individual, and this is in developer tooling in general. Often there's the appeal to an individual developer. Hey, use this thing; you'll be better at what you do. And then the line between DevRel and lead gen and marketing and all that stuff honestly gets blurrier there. And I don't want that to sound like a dirty word or something unhealthy, but when I'm a developer and I'm telling you, here's a thing that you can do that will
Yeah.
make your life better. And oh, by the way, you can just buy it because you have budget for this. That's different than here's a thing that will help you write applications in a more modern, better, scalable, faster, whatever way. And your boss's boss's boss will sign the deal. Those are different plays, but I think they're both important parts.
Tim, one topic I'd love to get your take on that's down this line, this conversation I had a lot of times, especially last summer as we were going through Y Combinator, and seeing lots and lots of people, our fellow founders, launch different types of dev tools, right? And the typical team setup is, hey, there's a team of 2 or 3, mostly engineers, launch something, get a bit of traction on GitHub. They realize very quickly, okay, we need to start instrumenting the product, understand how many people are using our tool, and then very quickly the topic of okay, we need to think about investing in developer experience. We need to think about making fantastic docs. We also need to think about maybe investing in community and writing content. And it's this big scattered conversation, and very rarely is there a clear path to where do you start? Right. I'd be curious to get this is in a very different end of the spectrum, but I'd be super curious to hear what words of advice you'd pass on to folks in those shoes.
Yeah. I think well, in the broadest possible view I take of DevRel, I include documentation in that. It doesn't usually organizationally work out that way, but I think it's a part of the same motion of helping developers be successful in their whole adoption journey. So it's not 100% obvious where to start. I would say in a new infrastructure or tooling startup, if you don't have docs, you don't have anything. You can not have developer advocacy if you have docs and you still have a shot at it. So there's got to be docs. Those are probably in the early stages not going to be the output of professional writers. Those are going to be engineers who wrote some stuff and it'll work and maybe have some rough edges. But as long as you're there, then if your adoption is driven by developers, pretty early on in the history of that company, you're going to want somebody as you're differentiating, growing, and adding roles who's focused on helping developers be aware of it and know how to kind of get started. That's your first developer advocate hire. Hire, I usually tell people to kind of look within your community of users. Don't make a customer mad by hiring a star performer, but maybe make them a little mad. You look in that community of users for that perfect developer advocate, somebody who is good at content, knows the tech, is a native speaker of the technology, and get them creating resources to help people, help other people understand, have something to play around with, get started building. That's what you do.
And then start measuring.
And then start measuring. Yeah. And that, I'm hoping for the current generation of cloud first or maybe cloud only businesses. I come from all these places where there's an open source, there's a tarball, just sounds so old fashioned now. In cloud native or cloud first businesses, the measurements should be easier. And you want to be careful still if the user is not the buyer. You don't want to sell to the user because that just makes us mad. It makes us feel like you're an untrustworthy marketer. And that's not how we solve problems anyway. We don't buy big things. We write code. And so, you don't want to start turning your users into buyers or trying to, because that will alienate them.
Right.
But if a cloud sign up to the free tier is a thing that you can track, then you should have a really good source of a clearer path to measuring outcomes from your developer relations program. In that case, I haven't lived that pure life yet. It's someday, but that's promising that in pivoting to the cloud, we might be able to see that stuff be a little clearer.
Fingers crossed. And until then, Tim, I think an exciting note to end on, if you will, is actually going a little bit back to your personal story, because you did recently rejoin Confluent
Yes,
after a stint away. And I think the note to end on might actually be what makes Confluent an exciting company to join right now, other than all the stuff that's going on, such as the upcoming current conference and what have you.
Absolutely. As a part of that story, I do want to say that I was never really looking to leave StarTree. It's also a super exciting place, very important part of what's going on in the world of event-driven architecture and data streaming.
Yeah.
But what got me at Confluent was scale and product vision. And, these are the folks who have been saying for 10 years, hey, this stuff is coming. And then building a little bit of the infrastructure at a time to say, hey, it's coming, it's here. Let's build it. And now let's try and figure out the next piece, and let's work together. And okay, it's not that, it's Flink, and it's a connection to the data warehouse with Iceberg. And this is this whole new platform that we're building. This is the first time in 40 years, in my opinion, that we have had an architectural pivot like this. It was not the internet. It was client server in the 80s. That was the last time there was this big of a shift in the way applications are being built. And I see Confluent as the company that has the vision for what that infrastructure is going to look like. And heck, not even we know all the answers. It's not done yet. But this is, I think, a place where I can keep pushing forward on building the tools and working together with the community to come up to the answers to questions that'll still be in use in 30 years when, as I like to say, people who are right now learning how to eat will be building systems based on the paradigms we're developing now, decades from now. Awesome.
And what a note to end on there. Go give Tim a massive follow everywhere at socials. I personally am a big fan of you on LinkedIn. Lots of great memes, lots of good stuff.
Thank you.
Tim, any final words or shout outs to end on? Where can people go find more stuff?
Well, it's not yet September 17th through 19th. You want to go to current.confluent.io, sign up. That's my biggest plug. And if this ships after that, or you listen after that, well, check out the videos.
Cool. Thank you so much for your time, Tim.
Thanks.